There is a strange paradox that almost nobody talks about. The person with the highest IQ, often the one struggling to pay rent. The one with average grades ends up owning the company. The person who reads hundreds of books every year still worries about paying bills. Meanwhile, someone who barely touched a book after school somehow owns multiple businesses. If you've ever wondered why knowing so much hasn't changed your financial life, then this video is for you. Because you've been told the same story your entire life. Study harder, learn more, think deeper than everyone else, and eventually success will come looking for you. So, you followed the rules, you learned, you improved yourself, you understood the world better than most people around you. Yet somehow, the biggest rewards kept going to people who didn't seem nearly as intelligent as you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your intelligence was never the thing holding you back. The real problem was how you used it. More than 500 years ago, Machiavelli watched brilliant minds lose everything while bolder, less intellectual people gained power, wealth, and influence. He understood something that most people still refuse to accept today. Knowing is not the same as moving. In this video, I'm going to show you the 6 invisible traps that quietly keep intelligent people poor. And chances are you'll recognize yourself in at least 3 of them. Do not look away because recognizing the trap is the first step to escaping it. Let's begin with the first one. The trap that intelligent people often mistake for wisdom. It has a name, the research cage. Here's how it works. You discover something that could genuinely improve your life. Maybe it's investing. Maybe it's learning a valuable skill. Maybe it's starting a business. You recognize the opportunity, but because you're smart, you decide you'll understand every detail before taking the first step. So you start researching. You watch videos, listen to podcasts, compare different options, study fees, study taxes. Then you wonder, what if there's an even better strategy? So you research that one, too. You build a plan. Then improve the plan. Then discover a flaw. Then redesign everything from the beginning. Every time you catch another mistake, you feel satisfied. After all, only careless people rush into things. You're being responsible. At least that's what you tell yourself. Then something interesting happens. Weeks become months. Months quietly become years. And somehow you still haven't started. Be honest with yourself. How many ideas are you currently researching that you haven't actually acted on? How many goals exist only inside your notes, your bookmarks, or your head? How many browser tabs are still open because you're waiting until you feel ready? Now, imagine someone else. They heard about the exact same opportunity during a casual conversation. Instead of spending months analyzing it, they simply started. They didn't fully understand every detail. They weren't experts. They didn't know every tax rule. They didn't know every possible risk. They simply knew enough to begin. So, they invested a small amount or launched the first version or started learning by doing. Then they kept going. 3 years later, they're already miles ahead. Not because they were smarter, because they started sooner. And here's where the numbers become painful. Imagine investing just $200 every month. It doesn't feel life-changing. In fact, it feels almost insignificant, but over 30 years, that small decision compounds into something enormous. Now, here's the part nobody likes hearing. The first years matter more than the later ones. Those early years have the longest time to grow, which means the 3 years you spent researching weren't simply delayed. They were the most valuable years you had. And once they're gone, you never get them back. You traded time, the most valuable asset you'll ever own, for the comforting feeling of being prepared. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. In chapter 25 of The Prince, he argued that fortune rewards boldness more often than caution. Luck doesn't wait for the person who's still collecting information. Opportunity doesn't pause because you're still comparing options. It never has. Think about that. You believed research was protecting you. But what if it wasn't protection at all? What if it was simply fear wearing the disguise of intelligence? Every article, every book, every podcast, every extra week of preparation, another brick in a paper prison. Meanwhile, someone else was already outside building something real. The cruelest part, it feels productive. You finish another book. You complete another course. You organize another spreadsheet. You feel like you're making progress. But progress without movement is an illusion. It's like sprinting on a treadmill. You're exhausted, but you're still standing in exactly the same place. Now, Don't misunderstand me. Learning is valuable. Knowledge matters. But learning without a deadline eventually becomes procrastination dressed in expensive clothes. So, here's the shift. Stop giving yourself deadlines to finish researching. Start giving yourself deadlines to make decisions. Not months, not years, a few days. Gather enough information, then decide even if the decision isn't perfect, especially if they aren't perfect. Because readiness is one of the biggest lies intelligent people believe. Nobody feels ready before they begin. Readiness appears after action, never before. Now, delaying action is expensive, but it's only the first trap. The second one is even more dangerous because unlike the first, most intelligent people defend it. They're proud of it. And without realizing it, it steals one of the highest paying skills in the world. This trap doesn't look like failure. It looks like having standards. Welcome to the dignity trap. At some point, you need income, real work, real opportunities, but you also have principles. You have an education. You have intelligence. You've worked hard to become who you are. So, naturally, there are certain things you refuse to do. You won't take jobs that feel beneath you. You won't sell. You won't cold message strangers. You won't ask people for money. You won't do awkward work. You won't do small work because small work feels beneath someone with big ideas. So, you wait. You apply for the positions that match your qualifications. Some reject you, some don't. Some opportunities seem too small, so you decline them because surely someone with your mind deserves something bigger. Then 2 years quietly disappear. You're still waiting for the opportunity worthy of your intelligence. Now compare that to someone else. They had bills. No luxury of waiting. So they accepted the uncomfortable job, the one involving constant rejection, cold conversations, sales, negotiation, talking to strangers every single day. At first they were terrible. Every rejection hurts. Every conversation felt embarrassing. They went home frustrated. Their pride took a beating. Nobody admired them. Nobody applauded them. But after several months, something changed. They started understanding people. They learned how emotions influence decisions. They learned how to earn trust, how to communicate value, how to ask confidently, how to hear no without taking it personally, without realizing it. They developed one of the most valuable wealth-building skills on earth, the ability to persuade. And persuasion changes everything. It doesn't matter whether they stay in sales, start a business, lead a company, raise investment, or negotiate their salary. Every room they walk into now becomes different because they know how to move people. And people move money. Most people think this trap is about laziness. It isn't. You didn't avoid those opportunities because you were unwilling to work. You avoided them because you were afraid. Afraid of looking inexperienced. Afraid of being rejected, afraid of looking average after spending your whole life being known as the smart one. That's a very human fear. I understand it. But understanding it doesn't reduce the cost. Machiavelli believed that leaders who only choose actions that preserve their dignity eventually lose to those willing to do whatever reality demands. Keeping your hands clean may protect your pride, but it rarely fills your pockets. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The work that creates wealth often looks unimpressive in the beginning. The skills that seem beneath you are frequently the ones that buy your freedom later. You didn't reject work. You rejected the lessons hidden inside it. So, here's a challenge. Once every week, do something your ego doesn't like. Have one uncomfortable conversation. Ask one difficult question. Reach out to one stranger. Practice one skill that feels slightly beneath your level, not because it pays well today, because it destroys the version of you that believes you're too important to start small. A skill your pride refuses to learn can never become a skill that earns you money. I've seen incredibly talented people remain broke for decades. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because they couldn't survive one season of looking inexperienced. They wanted lifelong success without paying the temporary price of humility. Eventually, you lower your pride. You decide you're finally ready to build something of your own. And that's exactly when the third trap quietly appears. This one is dangerous because it looks beautiful. It's called the perfect plan delusion. Ironically, This trap almost never affects careless people. It targets capable people, people who genuinely care about doing excellent work. You finally have an idea, something exciting, something meaningful. And because it matters to you, you decide you're going to build it properly like a professional. So you create the perfect strategy. You write detailed documents, build spreadsheets, research competitors, study successful businesses, study failed businesses, forecast every possible outcome. Then you notice a weakness, so you improve the plan. Then another weakness appears. You improve it again. Every time you're close to launching, you discover one more thing that isn't quite ready. Months pass. Then years eventually, you own one of the most beautifully planned businesses that has never existed. Meanwhile, someone else launches a version that honestly looks terrible. Their website isn't polished. Their pricing makes no sense. Their branding is weak. Their product still has obvious flaws. But they launch anyway. Within weeks, they get their first customers. Those customers complain. They listen. They improve. More customers arrive. More feedback comes in. They fix the real problems instead of imaginary ones. A few months later, 10 customers became 50. 50 become hundreds. A few years pass. Now they own a business that's alive, generating real income, still imperfect, but growing. You're still polishing version 1. Still convinced you're almost ready. Here's one of the hardest truths intelligent people ever hear. An imperfect business that exists will always beat a perfect business that never launches. Every successful company began as something awkward, something incomplete, something that embarrassed its founder. None of them entered the world fully finished. They became successful because the real world taught them what needed fixing. You wanted to skip that process. You wanted to avoid making mistakes publicly. You wanted everything perfect before anyone saw it. But the market has never rewarded perfection. The market rewards participation. Reality teaches lessons that planning never can. You can spend 1,000 hours imagining what customers might want or spend 1 week letting actual customers tell you. Which lesson do you think is more valuable? Everything you predict while sitting at your desk is still a guess. Only the marketplace reveals the truth. There's another version of this trap that happens every day. Maybe it even happened this morning. A task needed doing. It wasn't difficult. It would have taken 20 minutes. But somehow you delayed it. 3 hours disappeared. Tomorrow is next week. Next week became next month. And suddenly years have passed. The thing you always intended to start still hasn't begun. So here's the solution. Forget launching the masterpiece. Launch the rough draft. Take your giant vision and cut it down until one real person can experience it this week. Not next month, this week. Because the moment your idea touches reality, it begins improving. If you've recognized yourself in even one of these first 3 traps, do not look away because the next 3 traps are much bigger. The first 3 quietly steal your opportunities. The final 3 steal your future. The 4th trap disguises itself as wisdom. It is a subtle poison that intelligent people drink willingly. Let's call it neutrality sickness. Eventually, every meaningful life becomes less about ideas and more about people. People create conflict. A business partner disappoints you. A friend crosses a line. A co-worker betrays your trust. Someone clearly does something wrong. Now you have a decision to make. Confront them or stay silent. Here's where intelligence quietly becomes your enemy because your mind can see every perspective. You understand their motives. You understand your own emotions. You understand the consequences of speaking up. You understand the consequences of staying quiet. Every side seems reasonable. Every outcome feels complicated. Every decision contains uncertainty. So you make no decision at all. You wait. You hope the situation solves itself. But problems almost never disappear because we ignore them. They simply grow slowly, silently. Maybe your business loses money. Maybe the relationship will deteriorate. Maybe resentment builds beneath the surface. Months pass. Sometimes years. You tell yourself you're being mature, reasonable, patient. You're keeping the peace. But peace built on avoidance isn't peace. It's simply damage happening quietly. Now compare that to someone else. They looked at the same situation. They chose a side. They spoke. They acted. Sometimes they were completely wrong. They misjudged people. Trusted the wrong partner. Made expensive mistakes, lost friendships, lost money, real losses, painful losses, the kind that keeps you awake at night. But here's what separates them from you. Because they acted early, they also recovered early. The mistake became a lesson, not a life sentence. They adjusted, changed course, moved forward. The world responded to movement. That's the hidden truth inside this trap. A wrong decision made quickly is usually fixable. A right decision that's never made cannot help you. You cannot recover from choices you refuse to make. Machiavelli explained this clearly. Someone who tries to remain neutral during conflict usually loses support from both sides. The winner doesn't trust the person who never stood beside them. The loser can't protect the person who never stood with them either. Standing in the middle feels safe, but eventually you discover you're standing there alone. Trying to please everyone often leaves you trusted by no one. That's the cost of permanent neutrality. Your hesitation wasn't wisdom. It was paralysis. Wearing expensive clothes. Being decisive doesn't guarantee you're correct. Decisive people make mistakes constantly. The difference is they move, and movement gives reality something to respond to. Stillness never does. So next time you're frozen because every option seems reasonable, treat that feeling as your signal, not your excuse. Pick one direction. Commit. Adjust later if necessary. Because silence isn't avoiding the battle. Silence is choosing defeat one quiet day at a time. Each trap we've covered takes something valuable. The first stole your momentum. The second stole valuable skills. The third stole execution. The fourth stole decisive action. But the next trap is quieter than all of them combined. By the time you recognize it, the damage is often irreversible. The fifth trap is different from all the others. It doesn't quietly drain your bank account, it quietly steals your life. This is the compounding cliff. Picture yourself 20 years from now. Two people started in exactly the same place, the same small apartment, the same empty bank account, the same dreams. But now their lives don't even resemble each other anymore. The other person doesn't work the way they once did. Their business runs without needing them every hour. Their investments continue growing while they sleep. They have a home, a family, and perhaps the greatest luxury of all time. Time to travel. Time to build memories. Time to enjoy the people they love. Time to choose how they spend each day. You, on the other hand, still work hard. You earn a respectable salary, the kind of income most educated people hope for. But underneath that paycheck, there are no real assets, no business generating income, no investments doing the heavy lifting. Every month follows the same cycle. Salary arrives, bills leave, a little money remains. You promise yourself, I'll start investing next month. Then next month becomes next year. You're not lazy. You're not unintelligent. You've simply begun running out of the one resource you always believed was unlimited: time. And time never sends you a warning. It never announces, this is your last chance. It simply keeps moving. Whether you move with it or not, that's what makes this trap so brutal. Then one ordinary afternoon, you hear some news. Someone you always believed was less intelligent than you just bought their second home. Maybe they sold their company. Maybe they retired early. Maybe they no longer need to work. You smile politely. Congratulations to them. Then something quietly sinks inside your stomach because deep down you know something. You've always known more. You still understand markets better. You still understand business better. You still understand investing better. You can explain exactly how wealth is built. Your theories are sharp. Your analysis is impressive. Some of your ideas are completely correct. But knowledge can no longer close the gap because the gap isn't about intelligence anymore. It's about time. They began compounding 20 years ago. You're beginning today. Those two timelines will never become equal again. Even if your income suddenly triples tomorrow, you cannot purchase 20 years of missed growth. No amount of money can buy back decades that have already disappeared. This is the mathematics of wealth. It doesn't reward the smartest person. It rewards the earliest consistent action. Someone investing small amounts at 25 often finishes far ahead of someone investing huge amounts at 45. Not because they're smarter, because they started sooner. That's the painful arithmetic most people refuse to face. You didn't lose your future through one catastrophic mistake. You lost it through thousands of tiny delays. Each one felt reasonable. Each one seemed harmless. Each one stole a little more time until suddenly there wasn't much left to compound. Now, let me tell you something about Machiavelli himself. Because this may be the most important lesson in the entire video. Machiavelli wasn't ignorant. He wasn't lacking information. He wrote one of the greatest books ever written about power. He understood politics, leadership, strategy, and human behavior better than almost anyone in history. Yet, despite all that understanding, he died poor, living in a modest home. Removed from the political world, he understood so brilliantly. Knowledge wasn't his problem. And if you're watching this, knowledge probably isn't yours either. Now, imagine yourself at 50. The other person spends an afternoon sitting in their garden doing absolutely nothing important because they've earned that freedom. You are online at midnight winning another argument with a stranger. Explaining why the system is unfair. Explaining why successful people had advantages. Explaining why everything works the way it does. And maybe you're completely right. Maybe your arguments are flawless. Maybe you're more informed, more articulate, more intelligent. Eventually, the stranger stops replying. You won. Then you close your laptop, walk into the same apartment, open your banking app, and realize something painful. Winning arguments never paid your bills. Being right never created freedom. But here's why this story doesn't end there. Because you're not 50 yet. You're here watching this, which means the fork in the road is still in front of you. And that brings us to the sixth and final trap. The only one you can escape tonight. This final shift is called the redirection. Here's what most intelligent people don't want to hear. The answer isn't becoming less intelligent. You don't need to stop reading. You don't need to stop thinking. You don't need to ignore details or become reckless. Your intelligence isn't your enemy. It's simply pointing in the wrong direction. Right now, most of your mental energy goes toward understanding, analyzing, predicting, finding flaws, winning debates, seeing every possible angle. Imagine taking that exact same intelligence and aiming it somewhere completely different. Aim it toward movement. Use your intelligence to identify the next action instead of another reason to wait. Use your ability to analyze to make faster decisions, not slower ones. Use your understanding to choose the imperfect opportunity that's available today. Instead of waiting forever for the perfect one that never arrives, you don't need a new personality. You don't need to become someone else. You simply need to redirect the engine you've always had. Now, let me leave you with something practical because you've heard enough theory. You need something you can use immediately. The first tool, 24-hour rule. Whatever decision you've been delaying, take one measurable action within the next 24 hours. Not next week, not after another book, within one day. It doesn't have to be huge. Send one message. Make one phone call, fill out one application, buy one share, launch one page. Movement is movement. Progress has never depended on giant heroic moments. It depends on small actions repeated consistently. The second tool, make every step smaller. If your goal feels overwhelming, don't ask yourself to finish it. Shrink it. Break it into smaller pieces. Then break those pieces again. Keep reducing the task until it's almost impossible to avoid. If your brain can still create excuses, the step is still too large. The third tool, do the hardest thing first. Most people begin the day with easy tasks, quick wins, simple work, and their brain receives a reward. And once that reward arrives, the motivation to tackle difficult work quietly disappears. Reverse the order. Do the uncomfortable thing first before your mind has enough time to negotiate. Then repeat that process every day. Eventually, it stops feeling like discipline. It becomes an identity. You're no longer forcing yourself to act. You're becoming someone who naturally acts. That's the real transformation. Not one courageous decision, but becoming the kind of person for whom movement is normal. There's something else I want you to understand. The person you've compared yourself to throughout this entire video was never unintelligent. Not once. They were intelligent too. Their intelligence simply operated in a different arena. They understood action, execution, and momentum, while you mastered understanding. Here's the encouraging part. You don't have to choose between the two. The wealthiest people usually possess both. They think deeply. They read constantly. They analyze carefully. But when a decision arrives, they decide, not perfectly, not fearlessly, not always correctly. They simply move. And once they move, reality begins adjusting around them exactly as it has always done. The world has never reorganized itself around people who only observe. It responds to those who participate. Right now, there's probably one decision quietly sitting in the back of your mind. You already know what it is. The investment you've researched for months. The business you've nearly started. The conversation you've rehearsed 100 times. The opportunity you've almost accepted. The relationship you've almost ended. The price you've almost asked for. Hold on to that thought. Don't let it disappear when this video ends, because that's where your real life begins. Now we're back where we started. At the beginning, I told you something strange. The sharpest minds often remain broken. Now you understand why. It was never intelligence itself. It was that tiny invisible gap between knowing and doing. The good news, that's also the exact place where your future changes. Not tomorrow, not someday. Right now, don't close this video feeling inspired. Inspiration fades. Action remains. So before you do anything else, turn that decision you've been carrying into one small action, one email, one phone call, one message, one step you've been postponing for far too long. Then do it tonight or the moment you wake up tomorrow morning. Because the truth is brutally simple. You never rise to the level of your intelligence. You fall to the level of your action. The people you've envied throughout this video weren't necessarily smarter than you. They simply moved while you were still preparing. If this shifts the way you see yourself even a little, then don't stop here, because what you've heard in this video is only the surface. There are deeper layers to psychology, influence, and wealth that simply can't be explored fully in one video. Not because they don't exist, but because most people aren't ready to hear them. That's why most stay average. If you're not one of them, then subscribe. Because every video here is designed to sharpen your mindset, increase your value, and separate you from the crowd. No fluff, no noise, just strategy. Most people will watch this and move on. A few will stay and change. Decide which one you are.